Judy, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Starting Over podcast. I came across your work, and a line that really struck me that you have on your website is, "How big are you willing to be?" Why did you choose that?
Uh, Most people will say to me, isn't that a little egotistical? And I say to them, no, it's actually the humblest day of your life. When you agree to be the biggest version of yourself possible, you're taking responsibility for growing your own life into a superb adventure. And for the first time, you're really in service of life and the universe. So when people come to me, I say to them, okay, where are we going? How big are you willing to be? Because we don't play small here. You weren't born to play small.
What are some examples of that, actually? Because I think a lot of people would be frightened, perhaps, by that statement. It's going to bring up a lot of the limiting beliefs, a lot of perhaps even confusion about where people want to go.
Yeah, I think it does that. And I think for some people it's, well, I don't want to be big. It's how big are you willing to be in your space? So it may be that nobody in the family's ever been healthy. I'm willing to do that. Nobody's ever been good with money. I'm willing to do that. And then, how far can I take this? And that's for each individual person. It's for somebody who is really severely physically handicapped or challenged. How far can I push it? What can I do? We tend to give up on ourselves way too quickly and play far too small. So it's really saying, come on, come on. I'll tell you, somebody I worked with who said to me, well, I can't get a top position in North America because where I come from, we are not necessarily welcome. We know we are small people. We're a smaller population. And I said, what? No, this is what I grew up with, and this is true. And I said, no, it's not true. You've made it the truth, but it's not true. That person's just been appointed into one of the top positions in America within the last 3 months because he finally got that he was listening to all sorts of systemic sentences, which are those thoughts and feelings and mottos that we hear. And he was allowing that to limit him. And when he could take the lid off and say, how far can I really go? And he said to me, it's just joyful. I said to him, so people tell me it's hard work. And he said, it's not hard work. I could have chosen to stay the same or chosen to do this. I'm taking steps. If I'm taking steps, why not take big steps?
You say that we have invisible patterns that we've been handed down. And I guess part
Yes.
of that is what you're saying here. Is it that story or that narrative that we tell ourselves that we've often been on the receiving end of growing up?
Right, exactly. So you inherit those two ways. One is the way you've described, and the other one is epigenetically. So if there's, and this has been well studied, if there's an impact that's emotional and hard enough, it actually creates an imprint, and that starts to activate or deactivate your physical DNA, the proteins off and on. So that's the one way. But the way that people understand the best is, my mother told me, my father told me, my mother's mother told me, my mother's mother's mother told her. And so it becomes a reality. And then we get the meta patterns, the great big global ones. Money doesn't grow on trees, don't be greedy. And then my favorite, it's love or money. Love, at least money is not an or, it's an and. But we've been taught the other way. It's love and money. It's education and money. You can partner very, very well with money, but we've been taught it's greedy, it's wrong, only nasty people have it, those terrible rich people. Well, if you're looking at it through that lens, how can you possibly welcome it in? You can't.
I want to come a little bit over to your story before we go into really about these patterns and how to break free from them. And I want to know what is one of the biggest starting overs that you have had personally.
Gosh,
Something that's really marked and transformed your life.
Yeah, I think I had a double one sort of pretty much at the same time. So we moved from South Africa to the US and thought that was going to be easy. It was a business opportunity, and the business collapsed, which wasn't good. And It was really about starting over culturally. All your safe things that you've grown up, that you know, that are familiar, nothing. I can remember going into the grocery store and crying because I didn't know what potatoes to choose because they had so many. And so that was the one, but right on its heels was my dad being killed. And and they failed him in every one of the 3 disciplines that I was a specialist in medical care. And so that door slammed heavily shut. And it was going, when you leave South Africa, when I did, you left with nothing. So I came from something to nothing and then had that pulled out from underneath me. And it was really about either writing books or going crazy, which was what started this whole thing. And then that led to the work that I do now. But it was huge to really go back to zero and start over. There are days where you either sit in the bathtub and cry, grab the cats, because I have Siamese cats, and give them a hug, go for a walk, or go insane. So it was a lot of doing that, but also always knowing that somewhere, if I kept going, I could figure it out. And I think for me, it activated my figure it out gene. It was big.
That makes me think of, there's a well-known saying by a creator in this space, Marie Forleo, and she keeps saying,
Yes.
Everything is figure-outable. Everything is figure-outable. And it's such a growth-minded way of being. Of course, when we're in those difficult moments, it is hard to hold on to that. And I think zooming back, taking it one step at a time is probably what really helps.
Absolutely. And I didn't know she said that. I know her, but I didn't know she said that. But for me, I teach people, activate your figure it out gene and always ask, okay, in these moments, what's possible now? I think with my mom was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, and I could, you know those moments where you feel your whole world kind of imploding. And I can remember thinking, this is too much. It's going to kill me. And then I thought, hold on, be very careful, because the thoughts that you're having right now and the feelings you're having right now and the actions you take are about to create your new reality. What do you want to do now? And I can remember sitting thinking, this is not my cancer. I can be with on the journey, but this is not mine. I have a daughter out there and I have a life out there. I have to find the sunshine in this. And I guess we're going to learn something. Okay, I can walk back into that room. I'm good. But it's in the moment, it's in those moments that we've got to very carefully notice what we're thinking, feeling, and doing, because it's going to shape everything.
Yeah. Isn't it such a pressure, though? I think sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, geez.
Oh, yeah. No, I think my thing is, listen, God, guide, the creator, the universe, whatever we want to call it. I know you think I'm elastic, but give it a break.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Did you ever feel like you really didn't belong in the States and you had this whole period of feeling like an outsider?
Absolutely. It's so different. They do everything differently. And I would say one word and they'd be affronted. And I'd go, so I had to learn the American way of being. Plus, there's another thing. If you come from Europe or anywhere else, basically, if I walk in and I say to you, okay, Shannon, that won't work, but that's really good, you're fine. If you do that here, they won't listen to you, but they've shut down. You've got to start with, this works, and now let's have a look at this. If you don't start, so it's completely the opposite. You can't start a meeting easily without saying, how are you, what's going on, especially in the South. So I think one of the gifts from all of this is to become very global and very aware of how it is for others. What is your framework? How do I need to work with you in your framework? And then I do a lot of acculturation. How do we bring you over to this? And I think having been here now for 25 years, I'm really appreciative of a lot of what both cultures bring. But oh yeah, I felt so much like I didn't belong for a long time.
And I think irrespective of whether you feel that because you've moved or not, I mean, I've certainly had that too. I'm Australian British living in Switzerland.
Right.
I have a lot of American listeners on the podcast. And yeah, I often had the feeling of being different in some way and not really knowing where my home was or where my roots are. And I realized actually to what extent that is a common experience. People having a sense of not knowing where they belong, feeling like they're not good enough, feeling like they're an outsider. And there are common, deep-rooted beliefs that rise to the surface if we become aware of them through our circumstances. Yeah.
Right. Now, I agree with that. But I think belonging is one of the most important ones, because what we miss is if I feel like I don't belong, the opposite is waiting for you. It's saying, how can you belong? How can you create belonging? And so I think you often find when people are in that, if they're aware enough, they'll create a great circle of belonging, which allows them to belong.
What is the great circle of belonging?
Well, when I talk about that, I look at my daughter. She, of course, came across with us, and she's an adoptee. Her biological father wasn't around much. Her mother died. And then she said to me, I don't know where my family is, and I don't know how to belong. And slowly it was, you're my family. This is how I belong. I can create family. And so wherever she goes, she creates belonging. It's become a gift for her. And I think this is important. Often what feels like a wound or a struggle, if you flip it around, becomes a great strength.
Do you have an example of that from yourself?
Yeah, actually, even living here for the longest time, and it was interesting for me, for the longest time I really felt like a stranger in a strange world. And then very oddly, when 9/11 happened, I can remember walking in and going, they're hitting my country. And I suddenly realized I'd shifted. With that shift, it was, I can talk. Yes, I have a different accent, but I belong because people want to know where that accent's from, and it's a conversation starter. And suddenly, everything became more familiar. I wasn't needing to hold on to only the old. So I always say my roots are in Africa, my wings are in America, but I have them both. I don't feel split anymore.
Yeah, that's nice. Wholeness. I think we're all working on getting there.
Absolutely.
So is it true that I've heard that 95% of who we are, what we do, how we think is driven by our subconscious mind as opposed to our subconscious mind?
It's driven by our subconscious mind, but even more than that, it's driven by our multi-generational subconscious mind. A very high percentage of the time, you're not living your life, you're not fully present, you're actually in a systemic trance, and you're loyal to and repeating multi-generational patterns, and they run the show.
Okay, let's break this down, because this might sound like a big multi-generational systemic patterns. So
yes,
breaking that down, are you saying that we are in part who we are because of our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, that is not purely genetic?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you don't just have physical DNA, you have emotional DNA. This is the emotional DNA. The patterns of thoughts, feelings, and actions, that's your emotional DNA. And you are absolutely in part who you are because of that. So if you have a pattern that echoes down, what happens is you have an event, the event creates a decision. The decision creates reactions, thoughts, feelings. That becomes a mindset that gets traveled down through the generations, and it becomes who you are. And so often what's happening is an event back there, way back there. Great-grandfather dropped dead. Great-grandmother was left on her own. She said, you can't rely on a man. What she meant was the guy's dead. I've got to get up onto my 2 feet and run. But that sentence can translate down into, you can't rely on a man, you can't rely on a man. That then becomes they're useless, they're not worthy. And suddenly you have a client, or I have a client who says, I've fallen in love with the love of my life, but you can't rely on a man. So we go all the way back and see, where did that start? Who does it belong to? And then disentangle it, because the purpose of those patterns is for it to travel all the way to you and for you to decide, am I going to repeat it again? Or am I the change agent who's finally going to bring something different and more to the system? And it's huge, because the minute you have one new thought, one new feeling, and one new action, now you're literally no longer living in the past. You're absolutely present, and your predictable future is no longer your predictable future. All bets are off.
You know, it makes me think of even conversations I've had recently with friends about ways in which they're feeling limited in their life. For example, I have one friend who says, I am really struggling to open up and connect authentically with a man. And she's very close. She's quite disciplined with herself. And she says, the thing is that I'm trying not to be, but it is exactly how my mum is. And equally, I have another friend who has challenges around spending, and she overspends even though she earns well. And it has been a family story for her. Her parents also had the similar kinds of behaviors. So you're saying that these are the kind of multi-generational patterns that we can have that we're often not aware of, or when we are aware of them, they're still difficult to change because,
right.
Yeah.
But they're yours. That's the gift. The multi-generational pattern is the gift. It's saying to you, look at what your parents did. Look at what your grandparents did. Did it work? If it worked, please keep doing more. If it didn't work, this is yours to change. It's your gift. So your overspending friend wants to go and have a look and say, okay, my relationship with money is like theirs was. How can money and I partner differently? And she could be the one who becomes the fiscally responsible one who then builds a fortune because she pivots in that moment. And your other one, the one who struggles to connect authentically, what was the precipitating event? If you don't know your family history, you can timeline your own life and you will find it. So questions are, when did it start for you? What was happening for you at the time? What did you make it mean about you? What did you make it mean about others? Is there a pattern like that in the family system? Now, the one who says her mother was like that, it doesn't belong to her. She's carrying that protection, or inauthentic. It's not inauthentic. It really is a protection. She's carrying that protection for her mother. And in a constellation, what I would do is have her stand and her mother stand and then say to her mother, I see that, and I see what happened for you, and I have to leave that with you. Please watch me as I do it differently. That puts it down and unlocks the permission.
So I'll tell my story around this because I had never heard of what a constellation is, and you can explain what that is afterwards. But it was suggested to me by my husband when I first moved over to Switzerland. And he said, if you ever done this before, just go and experiment. So I did. Was driving through the beautiful countryside in Switzerland, arrived at some lady's house and did not know what to expect. I was in her attic space, wooden floors, beam ceilings, and she said, I want you to start putting chairs in the room to represent an important person or place in your life. So then she said, okay, where are you going to place the chair of my boyfriend, I suppose at the time, now husband? Where are you going to place his chair? What about your son? What about your mother? And then she started opening a dialogue for me between me and my mother, or me and my partner, and what I would say. And you know what really struck me? I can't remember all of the conversations, but there was a part where I was sitting opposite my mother, who she wanted to be my mother. And it was around me feeling like I needed to support her and worrying, quite honestly, about her health, about how she's doing. And she said, I want you to hold this ball. And she literally gave me a heavy ball, a crystal ball, and I sat with it in my hand. And she said, this represents the weight of what you've been carrying, like the weight of,
right.
Makes me teary, actually. Like, yeah. this represents the weight of what you carry for your mum. Give it back. And it was so hard. And I said, it was so strange, but I said, I don't want to. And the weird thing was that I felt like if I put it back on and say, this is not mine to carry anymore, that I would be hurting her, that I wouldn't be the good daughter. And I did not know I carried that story until I did that. And clearly it evokes something now.
Yeah. And if I listen to you, what I would say to you a little differently is, okay, Shannon, can you hold that ball in your hands? And can you look at your mom and say, all of the generations that got you to here, and you had that heaviness to carry. And I'm looking at it, Mom, and it's time that we put it down. And I can do it differently. How does that feel?
More supported. Yeah. Does this go back to what you said about family loyalty?
Absolutely. You're caring for the family, and it goes back to what you asked about belonging. This is how you belong. All the women have been like this. And then what you turn around and say to your mom is, you know what, Mom? For you who couldn't, I can. Because of you, me. Thank you.
It's very touching. I don't know. I mean, people listening to this, like, you can obviously hear the emotion that comes out in it. And I think it's because in many respects it was a transformational experience, because it shines light on all of these family dynamics that we so often don't really consider, especially when it's easy to stay in our frustrations and our anger.
Right.
At least that was certainly my experience. It's you're able to show up differently with your family than you are at work or with your friends. So you say it way more how it is. Your frustrations mount very, very quickly. And I realized it was kind of easier to stay in that than it was to actually dig a little bit deeper and go, what is actually going on?
Yeah, and that's really important, because what you just highlighted is what we call a systemic trance. It's so much easier. It may not be good, but it's so much easier. And so we slide into that. And for people who are wanting to know how you get out of that, it doesn't mean you're giving up your family. It means you're adding to your family. But you've got to create an adventure this side that's big enough to pull you out of where you've been stuck. So it's got to be an exciting adventure. It's got to be something that gives you purpose, something that you really want. And if it's strong enough, it'll pull you out of that, past all of the old excuses, past the hurts, past the sadnesses. But the thing I tell people all the time is, remember, you will always be connected, and every one of them enabled you. So don't be sad about it. They're actually waiting for you to take the step so that the entire system shifts.
You know, I felt like I, in ways, was a cycle breaker in the family. So when I started on this journey of starting over, of starting the inner work, starting healing, starting asking more questions, I realized, or I learned through asking more questions of my family too, that every single woman that I know of in my past had been with an abusive male partner.
Wow.
And I was in that situation myself. And that was, in fact, what ended up sparking this journey, was a very difficult separation that made me go, oh man, I have to do something differently. And then I thought, how is it that I have chosen the exact same thing as my family? And of course, now I'm trying to show up differently. I'm trying to be the cycle breaker so that I don't pass on that to now my son and the generations moving forward.
Right. And yeah, that's really important, is asking how. How do the women show up? Because you need the one for the other. So how do the women show up, and how am I showing up differently? If they were all meek and mild, am I a little bit more fiery? If they took it because that's a woman's lot, am I going, no? So you have thanks to every one of them, because they got you to a point where you went, enough, we're changing this. And so it's just the one new thought. Your thought's already there. How do I break this and how do I do it differently? One new feeling. Forget this. I'm absolutely worthy of being in a healthy relationship. One new action. Any hint and I'm out of here. I will not get caught in something and stay too long, because women often stay too long.
What are some other patterns that you see for other people?
Many.
What are some really common ones?
Alcoholism is one. Definitely money patterns. The money patterns, I think a lot of them go back to the Great Depression. And you could see hoarding, you could see overspending, you could see people who won't say because what's the point, it comes, it goes. You could see feast and famine. Relationships, absolutely. You have a guy who's too meek and mild because his wife dominated, but we don't always look at why did she dominate, and that's important, or the other way around. I do have one where a woman was beaten within an inch of her life. She came to class or to an event. She was hugely overweight, walking on 2 sticks, and she'd been beaten by colleagues by accident. They thought she was the enemy. She was, it was quite by accident, but it nearly killed her. So we have a look in her family system, and she says, my mother didn't do well, my grandmother, and she says, oh, my great-grandmother found out that my grandmother was pregnant out of wedlock and beat her with a stick to within an inch of her life. And there you've got the 2 mirror events, and they show up. This woman was beaten with a stick, and I said to her, I hear that, but I want you to notice something. You're actually using sticks for support, so you're turning them into something different already. Also, she was ashamed and could never ever get over it. You're sitting in that position, but you can give that back to her and you could begin to do it differently. So we had quite a lot of dialogue, because there is a lot of dialogue that happens. So she disappears and off she goes, and comes 6 months later, this gorgeous looking, size 4 person comes walking into the room, lovely hair, waltzes in, and she says, hi. And we're all going, okay. And you are? She says, this is who I was. After I started working with it and realizing I didn't need to carry it for my grandmother, my mother, my great-grandmother, I decided that was rubbish. I put down the sticks, I went to rehab, I started things going, and here I am. That's called turning it around. And now she runs her own business. Once you commit to it, and there's a thing that I teach, which is head, heart, gut. When your head says yes and your heart agrees and your gut agrees, that's when you're aligned and that's when things will happen. Now, we do that all the time. You go, I'm so stupid. And your heart closes and your gut tightens. Yep, now you've just cast a spell that says, I'm stupid and I've swallowed it. But the opposite is also true. I'm doing this amazing podcast. I'm in this beautiful country. I've broken some of the spells of the women. I'm heading in the right direction. I love what I'm doing. That is a good spell to cast.
But what is the difference between that and just positive thinking?
It's
of just
easy.
shifting from negativity?
It's easy. Often positive thinking is here. It's not here and here. It's when these two connect. When you connect a higher emotion to the thought and your gut kicks in and starts to get excited, that's when the magic happens. Positive thinking is great because it'll give you a bit of a smile, but it's when you really connect all of those and attach it to a purpose. Because if you don't have a purpose, it's out there drifting in the wind waiting for something to land. Attach it to a purpose.
I like that. So let's go to a bit what we were speaking of before with the constellation and how this can be a way of breaking patterns that we have. Can you explain what somebody listening could gain from doing this constellation?
Wow.
And do they need a specific purpose?
No. Okay, so this is where my working with constellations is probably a teeny bit different to many of the ways that are worked. Very often you go and have a constellation done, you see the pattern, you see the problem, and we're done. You get to give back the ball or whatever it is, and we're done. Where I work is, and then what? I'm very much in the and then what? Because what I do is I sit down with you, take a history, and I listen very carefully to what you're saying, because I will use your words later in service of you. So listen to the words, set it up, and then we start to have the conversation. What can people expect? Quite often, many times, a very quick, visceral, embodied aha shift. Suddenly everything clicks in. You can see why it happened, when it happened, what was happening, how it's affected you, how it's limited you. And then we look at, okay, so what is your purpose? So, for example, I have a lot of people who will come in and say, I'm depressed. We've always been depressed. Our whole family's depressed. And we go through it and they start to grin and I say, what's going on? I think I know what my purpose is. What's your purpose? Well, everybody's been miserable in the family. I think I'm joy. Yes, you are joy. So it's really that pivot as well. And it's for everything. It really is. It's for relationships. It's for health. It's for decisions. I use it very often with my executives to make choices. It teaches them to make choices using head, heart, gut, whole body. And the first time I do it, they go, I had a CFO who said to me, we're not doing the woo-woo stuff. Just show me how to solve this. And I said to him, I said to him, okay, I'll tell you what, just write down the stuff on Post-it notes so I know who the players are. And then I said to him, you know, I'm a very visceral person. I need to see things. I'm very kind of visual as well. Can we put each one of those onto a piece of computer paper? And let's just put a little arrow at the top. So he did that. And I said, well, okay, now show me what it looks like again. So he puts it down and he says, no, well, not this way, but maybe a bit this way. And I said to him, so these two are very close. No, they're not really that close. So we went through the whole thing and we got in. He said, I know what the solution is. And I said, great. And he looks at me and says, you did a constellation, didn't you? I said, yep, sure did.
Because this was Post-it notes representing people and a problem that he had at work. So you would lay them out.
I laid the computer paper, right? And then said to him, so show me how those all fit together. And he would say, well, the CMO's over here and this one's over here and this one doesn't want to play. So because you've got an arrow on the paper, it becomes a directional marker. And then I said to him, he said, I do not understand this particular group. And I said to him, do me a favor, just go and stand there the way that it is. And he said, well, I'm standing there, but they can't even see what's going on here. And I said, is that ever a complaint? And he said, oh. So it very clearly shows you what's going on. And the upshot of that is when they ask me to problem solve in a company, that's what we do. If I don't have enough live representatives, we use computer paper. It's extremely effective.
It's interesting because, you know, at some point I want to ask, well, is there any scientific evidence for this? This is very woo-woo. And then to hear at the same time that you are a coach for, you know, Fortune 500 executives and you're doing this kind of work, it's surprising, I've got to say, because I wouldn't think that this group would be attracted to what you do.
So it's very easy. What I do is I go in very, very organizationally. So I speak their language. I get all the details. I ask them bits and pieces. And then I go into the other side. And everybody says to me, you are never going to get CEOs and CFOs and C-suite people to tell you their story. Well, when I can tie it together, they can't wait to tell me their story because they suddenly begin to realize that all the clues to their success are in the family system. And all the
way.
Yep, and all the clues to their success may also be in the organizational system. I had one who really was intriguing. He came in and he wanted to speak to me, and so we go into the boardroom and he sits in 4 different places and then his place. And I said to him, how many CEOs before you? He says 4. So I said, well, so none of those places belong to you. Yeah, that was it. He said, oh, yeah, yes. So he said, I want to get to the heart of the matter. And I said to him, no, where is the heart of the matter? And he looked at me and he looked over and he said, with the first one. So they clicked quite quickly. And then I said to him, so what stops you from taking your full place? So he said, well, at home, I always had to take a step back. So there we get it. And it's clicked with a home piece. So it's working the home piece to then work the professional piece. And suddenly he's going, I could take my place here. And I said to him, no, hold on a minute. And so I got him to pull the 4 chairs out and say to each one, this is your place, this is your place, this is your place, this is your place. Because of each one of you, I now have a place and I can take mine. And it hits very hard. They can suddenly feel it. And I think this is where people sometimes think it's woo-woo because of the feeling. But once they've experienced it once, they now know that they're no longer just a human being with a little bit of headspace. They have a whole lot of potential and power that they're not using yet.
It really loops back around to what you said about how big are you willing to be? And I feel like a lot of what you're doing there is shining light on something that's unconscious.
Yeah, and I think in companies, I was surprised. There was a company who one of the people came in and said, I want to work with you. And I said, sure. She said, you. And I said, okay, why me? Because you're obviously emphasizing it. She said, because people tell me if I work with you, I'm going to find out where I'm stuck and I'm going to grow. I need to do it. So there's an awareness that they tie together, and that if you could undo some of the pieces at home, you could do it differently at work. Or systems are friendly. What you can't solve at home, you can sometimes solve at work, and it echoes back.
So what are some of the ways, without doing a constellation,
Sure,
that people could identify what these inherited family patterns are?
That's actually a pretty easy one. Where you find yourself sad or miserable or frustrated or angry or stuck, go looking. Oh, and dogmatic. Dogmatic's my favorite one. I will not. I will always. If you find yourself being a bit of an activist in an area, start looking. That's where the patterns sit. Where did they come from? When did they start? What prompted them? Because something also important to remember is who you become is directly either in collaboration and collusion with or reaction to your family system. Either way, they're going to be responsible for your success.
That is fascinating. Either collusion with or reaction against.
Yeah, or reaction to. You may look at your mother who's been scrubbing floors for 10 years and you look at that and go, I am never going to be like that. I do not want that life. I'm going to get the education she never had. So who prompted it? Well, so we always have our parents to thank.
Quick pause. If you're a regular listener to the show and you have found value in these episodes, I would be immensely grateful if you pledged your support. Reality is, podcasting is not a free venture. There are many behind the scenes costs. But with your support, you'll be able to help me fuel the growth of this podcast and keep bringing you bigger and better guests each and every week. And of course, the signature honesty and real talk, which I'm known for. So if you'd like to say thanks and support the show for less than a cup of coffee per week, you can click the link called Patreon in the show notes. Thanks so much in advance, guys. Back to the episode.
Everything that happens to us is in service of us. And I think that's the one thing, if we would know that, we would feel so much less hurt, wounded, unhappy. I hear people coming to me and they're 70 and they're saying, it's all my mother's fault. No, at some point you had a choice. You could have looked at the miserable circumstances and gone, I need to change this. I choose to change this. And that's the kind of the locks and doors that we have in our lives and in the family systems. They're all locks and doors that are showing you your highest possibility if you're willing to go there. And then the other thing I will just say is, please, when a door slams shut, quit trying to open the thing. It's slammed shut for a reason. There's another door trying to open. If you keep looking at possibilities, you will literally never be stuck. You can't be stuck.
If you keep looking at possibilities and take action.
That's true, because sitting on a lotus blossom and meditating on a sunbeam is probably going to fill your soul, but it may not get you where you want to be. So yes, you have to take action. And people need to also realize it's that thing of, it's easy for you. You're an overnight success. Absolutely. After 15 or 20 years, overnight success happens because you've put in all the other nights. It's not overnight. And with constellations, sometimes it literally is. Because if you completely buy into it and commit to it and start moving, it's a very quick thing. Very quick.
So that is having the aha moment, the epiphany.
Yes.
And then making a commitment and choosing to do things differently.
Yeah.
And constantly reminding yourself of it.
Exactly. And it's really not even, commitment sounds like work. But think of the times where you've had something, you've gone, I'm doing this. It's beyond a commitment. You've begun. So it's when you get to that, I'm doing this, that it's no longer a commitment. It's now a journey and a passage with purpose.
And you can find some joy on the journey, hopefully.
Oh, lots of joy. Lots of joy. Yes, you're going to have dips, but lots and lots of joy.
So I want to speak a little about the inherited family patterns we can have around money in particular, because it's often a source of stress for a lot of us. And without realizing, I think there are often a lot of heavier emotions attached to it. There's something about money that sparks emotion much quicker than other subjects, I find.
Oh, yes.
If somebody was to come and say, I love money, well, like, what does that even do? The first time I heard somebody say that, I didn't like it.
No, because
right?
you can't do that. The meta pattern very distinctly says love of money is the root of all evil. How can you like money? Lust of money is the root of all evil, maybe. Love of money is not. It suggests you're a wise steward. Money is not a commodity. It's a relationship. And the way you show up for money is the way it will show up for you. It is also not an or, it's an and. It loves to partner. Loves to. And it's magic. If you look at all the things around the world that have happened with money, not because of, with money, it's partnered very well with people to create amazing things. And yes, of course, you can always do the opposite. You can be a jerk and you can make money bad. We could do that with just about anything. But also bear in mind that money is a synonym for just about anything that you can imagine. Health, happiness, success. And you've got to find out where it sits for you. What does money mean for you? Most people run 10 miles away from money if they possibly can. And so I recently did a money event and I gave everybody a book. And this book has got 100 sleeves. And it's marked 1 to 100. And every day you put in $1 the first day, $2 the next day, $3 the next day, all the way to 100. By the time you get to 100, you have 5,050 of either dollars or euros or whatever it is. But the point with that is you're finally giving money a direction. It's quite an adventure. Everybody's been writing back and they keep ordering the books. They've been writing and saying, do you know what I did? Do you know what I had? I was guilt-free because I put it in. One guy said to me, I went and flipped burgers. I said to him, why? You're an executive. He said, because I didn't want to touch that money, but I knew if I had this money, it was guilt-free and I could put it in and then I could do what I wanted to. So they started learning to play with money. And money wants to play. It loves playing and it loves being around us. We're the ones who've given it the bad rap. And in fact, for me, it was so bad, money couldn't get near me because of all of these. Love of money is the root of all evil. You should give it all away to everybody else. It's very unspiritual. Money, by the way, is only not spiritual flow if you make it so. It is very spiritual flow once you start recognizing it. So I go to the casino with my mother-in-law, got her jar, my jar. And in our family, honor and honesty is everything. So I put 3 coins in and I hit a jackpot. And then I suddenly realized I've taken them out of her jar, not mine. So I walk over to her. This is poor money trying to play with me. Walk over and I say to her, I hit the jackpot, but I took the 3 coins out of yours. So I guess this belongs to you. And she says, okay, and takes it. And everybody goes, that was mean. And I said, she had a good relationship with money. I kept pushing it away. It took me going, and I send my clients, you're fine. I send my clients on money walks. It took me doing my own money walk to realize that money was not an inanimate object. And people always...
What on earth is a money walk?
I'll tell you. So I went on a money walk. I went out, so I go outside and I go, okay, God, guides, universe, I need to talk to money because we were struggling. My father had been killed. It was bad. I need to talk to money. And I'm waiting to get hit on the back of the head with a piece of 2x4, and I sort of can feel a grin, but nothing else. So I started talking. Then I realized I'd actually been interacting with and loved money from very small. I would pick up empty bottles and bottle tops, and you could get candy for that. Or I would pick up seeds, because if you planted those, they made more. And so I realized I'd had an adventure and then been taught that money was bad and kind of backed off. And I said to money, I'm so sorry. I feel like I've not been a good friend. And there were lots of tears and lots of laughing and lots of all sorts. And on the way back, I picked up a $1, a $5, a $10, a $20, and a $100. And it was pretty clear at that point that money was not an inanimate object. And so...
You don't mean you picked them up off the street, do you?
Off the street.
Stop it.
Off the... I'm telling you, people... I'm lucky my daughter saw it, because people go, what? No, you didn't. Yeah, I did. I did. And that's... And I made a promise. I said, okay, money, I'm going to do the best I could do to be a friend and to listen to my own limiting thoughts about you as a friend. And I'm going to talk about you, and I'll talk about you a lot until... Because think about it. You asked me right at the beginning, have you ever felt like you don't belong? Mm-hmm. Think of the ways that we ask money to belong. It's not kind. Well, you just sit over there.
What do you mean?
Well, we say to money, how often do you hear somebody say, well, it's not about the money? That's nice. If you were a friend, aka money, how would you feel? It's not about Shannon. Or we don't need Shannon over here. Or really? That's the way you're going to talk to a friend? So when I'm talking to money, it's okay. Here's what I'm thinking. Any insights? What do we want to do here? Okay, I'm going in to go and do this business piece, money. I need you with me. And believe me, when I don't do that, it doesn't always go so well. I've learned to speak to money. Money DNA comes from many of my family members, where it was be wise, be careful, don't take a chance, watch out. And I've had to say, I can't do that. And the beauty of it is, as an immigrant, I couldn't just go and study again. It was, you better pivot and find another career and study fast and be really diligent. And then you've got to make up for all of the lost revenue. I had to speak to money. Money is an amazing friend and an incredibly wise mentor. If you start messing around with it, it's going to mess around too. Okay. But when you are really clear and you start to watch what you're doing and you talk to it, you're teaching yourself to lay down neural pathways that accommodate money being able to come in.
I've never heard of this, nor ever contemplated the idea of opening a conversation with money. Hey, money, how are you going today? Or but are you saying that you would then use this to negotiate better when you're proposing to a client, or what is that?
So I'll tell you what I discovered. So I was talking to money, I'm about to go in, and I'm thinking, okay, so money for the contract, I'm thinking around about this amount and this amount. And suddenly this kind of voice in the head goes, oh, that's all very well, but you should know yourself. You always ask for 15% too little. And I'd figured that out. There's a thing in the family around 15%. You should do this and then drop down. So you're telling everybody you're not worth that extra 15%. you could do that. I don't know how it's going to go. And I'm like, what is this? So I walked in and I started to ask, and I thought, just try it. And I asked for the full amount, and they went, oh, no, that's good. That's fine. We'll pay that. And I went, hold on. You said something. I listened. It worked. I pay very close attention. When I'm talking to money, I'm not only talking to money, I'm talking to my money patterns. I'm reminding myself these are the patterns that I've had, and these are the patterns that I'm creating. So it is a whole conversation, and I will have that before I walk in. Okay, Shannon, don't forget, you know what you do. You go like 2 for 1, or you're incredibly generous, and then you wonder why you're sitting. Don't do that. Are you good? Yes. Are you going to deliver? Yes. Do you have a good value proposition? Yes. Then what are you doing asking for less? And then there are times when I will walk around and go, that person really needs something. I know they can't do it. Okay, money, we're going to gift this one. Let's do this. This is fun.
Yeah. It's food for thought for sure. And I think I know as women, I mean, statistically, we know that we are much less likely to negotiate for a higher salary at work, to ask for our worth, to know what that is. I think the first time I started offering coaching services, I had no clue how much to ask for. So of course you do the Google search of what is the standard rate. And I think a lot of times people do approach money in that way. Yes. And then of course you have your own stories coming up too. But I certainly noticed that I asked for significantly less than what other people told me I should ask for. And then I had to think, wow, okay, maybe there is a story around money there.
Yes, and here's the thing for you to remember. If you went into a surgeon's office and you said to him, I've got a pain on my right side, it really hurts. And he looked at you and he said, you know what? I think that's your appendix. I think we could take care of that for you and I'll charge you $5. Are you going to that surgeon? I'm not. Mm-hmm. I walk into a surgeon's office and he says, yeah, that's appendix. Look, it's going to cost you about $1,200. We should have you on your feet. That's who I'm going to. So don't forget that money is also perception. I did that where I bid for a coaching contract and they came back to me and said, thank you, but we're not going to go with you. And I said, did I ask too much? And she said, no, you asked for so little that we realized you must not be a top coach.
Wow. That is the other side of it.
That was money talking. That was money talking.
So to bring it back over to the overall theme of shining light on our unconscious patterns of what we've inherited from generations gone by and us being the cycle breakers, wanting to choose a new path, what are some final words that you have to share with that in mind?
Be grateful to your ancestors because they've lined up the game, they've teed it up for you. Now turn around and play it, but play it to your highest potential, not your lowest. Who you are now and where you are now is absolutely no measure of where you're going to be. Look at your limitations and love them because they're trying to point you towards your possibilities. And ask yourself every day, how big am I willing to be? Because this is an adventure that was never meant to be played small.
What a great way to finish. I'm going to reflect on that for sure. Judy, thank you so much for your time today.
Shannon, and I want this on the show. Thank you so much for your time and your technical patience. She has a story for you.
You're welcome.